These are the HIG VR gloves. They're not perfect, but they offer a usable experience for the lowest price you're going to find a pair of VR gloves for. But before we get into the good and bad of these, who the hell are HIG VR? Much like you, I hadn't actually heard of these before until I randomly got an email out of the blue from them asking if I wanted to do a sponsored video on these gloves. That was a pretty crazy opportunity to pass up, but I wanted to do a bit of research first to make sure that these weren't like a scam or anything. I couldn't really find anything on YouTube, but this is a Chinese company, so I instead went straight to the source, bilibili.com. Just searching for VR gloves showed multiple videos of people who had bought and received working units, but I then got a bit distracted looking at other videos on Bilibili, and that would be really interesting to talk about that side of VR chat, but that's not the topic of the video, and also, 我是蒙新英国人，看不懂中文. So, it was pretty clear that these weren't total scams at least, and I had actually been wanting to try out VR gloves for a while because they're such a cool idea. I actually found this pair on eBay a while back, and I was this close to getting them, but there were no drivers available online, which meant they were basically paperweights, so I ended up taking up HIG on their offer of getting their gloves at a reduced price, which is about the same price I would have paid for the eBay gloves. So, while this is technically sponsored content, please trust that these are my own opinions, which probably should be easy by the end of this video anyway. So, with all that being said, what's the experience of using these gloves in VR chat like? To help explain, I'm going to run you through a typical everyday session with these HIG gloves, and also comparing it against the regular Pico 4 controllers and the Quest 3's hand tracking. I would have liked to include the Valve Index controllers in this assessment, but I do not have the budget for that right now, so you'll have to forgive me. So before you can even log into VR chat, first off is the basic software setup. Take the included dongle, plug it in, and then launch HIG software. This allows you to do basic setup stuff like calibrating the finger tracking and adjusting the position of your virtual hands relative to the tracker on the gloves. HIG does include some presets for these, but in my opinion they were off by quite a bit. You can set up your own, which I had to do, but I didn't have a proper UI to do it. Another thing I want to quickly point out is that these gloves track along a linear axis. In other words, they don't have any finger splay, which is the main difference between these HIG gloves and the tracking on much more expensive business VR gloves, or even the tracking on camera-based setups like the Quest 3. Realistically speaking, the tracking on these gloves is actually more comparable to the NES Power Glove than anything else. Once SteamVR has launched, the software connects, and we can hop into VR chat. The very first thing I normally do is walk up to a mirror and configure all the settings on my avatar. The joystick module, similar to the one found on the UDCAP gloves, makes the movement part a lot more reliable than if I was using the hand tracking gestures on the Quest, but is a bit more imprecise when interacting with the radial menu than the joysticks on, say, a Pico 4 controller. With the Quest hand tracking, I can pinch together different fingers with my thumb to bring up different menu options, but since the HIG gloves don't have finger splay, you instead fall back to the bindings of an index controller, which would be perfectly fine, except for the fact that with movement, VR chat still expects you to have the hand tracking bindings, which means they keep overlapping, and it's really annoying. You can turn this off, it's just not clear where, so it's here. Okay, the next thing is menus. I really wish I could just poke at them like a touchscreen or like the Quest's UI, but instead it's VR chat, so you have to hold a cursor out and then select things, which also would be fine if it worked more than 10% of the time, but it doesn't. I'm just left constantly holding my finger out, pulling in my finger, hoping it works. Most of the time it doesn't, but I am at least able to get through the menus and get into a world. Next up is calibrating my avatars. Full body tracking. If I was using SteamVR hardware, this would be an absolute cinch, since you can just slap a Vive tracker on the gloves, have it all work nice. Instead, I'm sticking my Pico 4 controllers on top of the gloves, which results in some nasty tracking dead zones, especially while T-posing for that calibration. Although I did notice later on that if you stick your hands out in front of you during the calibration, it actually works perfectly fine, so So with everything configured, I hop into a world and invite some friends over. And this is where the gloves really shine for me. As I'm chatting, I can gesture with my hands in a way unlike any of my other setups. If I was using the Quest hand tracking, I'd have to worry about keeping it within the camera's field of view. You know, if I dropped them down by my sides, the tracking would just stop entirely. The Pico controllers don't have that issue, they track really good actually, but having to worry about which fingers go on which triggers to do which gestures, it's just a lot to think about. With these gloves, I can just do the gesture with my hands, it's all really intuitive, and I just have a much better time chatting inside of, well, VR chat. And that's not even to mention the drinking potential of these. Sure, I'm no alcoholic, but I do enjoy me a good bottle of water, and these gloves are actually really good for that. Bottoms up. If I'm in a public instance, then these also serve as a great icebreaker. I already love showcasing and chatting about weird hardware just in general. That's basically what this channel is right now. So these gloves give me a great opportunity to do that within VR chat. People generally think they're really cool until I tell them about the downsides. One pattern that I noticed was that people who were less experienced with VR hardware expected them to be haptic gloves. That is, for me to be able to touch stuff and feel it, or at least have some kind of reaction. As soon as I tell them that it's just an input device, basically just index controllers, the mystique is kind of lost there. I guess it's just that when people hear VR gloves, they expect a lot more than HIG is able to deliver, especially at this price point. Which isn't necessarily HIG's fault even, it's just the nature of VR hardware development right now. But anyway, as the conversations continue, I pull out my camera and try and take a photo, which is already a decently fiddly process just with controllers, so this is like a worst case scenario for these gloves. I'll often have to try selecting an option over and over again, changing which hand I'm using to select it, changing which gesture I'm doing, because sometimes it works like an index controller, sometimes it expects you to pinch your finger and thumb together, which I remind you doesn't work on these. You just have to try and try again until eventually I'm able to get it all set up and take some photos. And by the way, during the production of this video alone, I have genuinely given myself finger cramps from the amount of times I've had to pull in and out my index finger. This is not a natural gesture and it doesn't work well for these gloves. Yeah, it's fine on an index controller, but when there's nothing to actually pull in on, it gets very tiring very quickly. I wish I could just do anything else. Whatever. Sure, you can blame this on funky input bindings or unstable tracking or just the very nature of VR cursor input being flawed to begin with, but what it means is that it's a lot harder for me to engage with one of my favorite parts of VR chat. Yes, this is a worst case scenario. Yes, this is another example of a menu input that would be significantly improved if I could poke at it like on the Quest UI. But as a reviewer, I don't review what could happen or what would be the best case scenario. I review what I have here right now. And what I have right now can be quite frustrating at times. But with photos out of the way, my group decides to hop over to a game world, at which point I have to give up on these gloves entirely. I tried playing Beat Saber with the gloves on and then holding a drumstick in my hands, and it worked, but it was so unstable, it was so hard to actually play, and the amount of shake of the controller on my wrist genuinely hurt after like one song. So it's not really practical. Oh, and speaking of, don't even think about using these for regular VR games. I tried it with Superhot just for funsies, and yeah, I'm not going to waste your time, it was unusable. But at the same time, does anyone even play regular VR games anymore? Realistically, the target demographic for this is clearly social VR users, so I'm not going to get on his case for that too much. So I ended up having to play Beat Saber with controllers, but as I was playing, I didn't really notice having something in my hands. It just disappeared eventually. But as I take a moment to chat in between songs, I can't help but notice how much harder it is to do finger gestures with the controllers. And as I sit down on the floor with the controllers next to me, I can't help but think how much more natural that position was with the gloves on. But then, right before we log off for the day, I decide to take some more photos. And I remember how much easier it is to interact with all the menus with a controller. And I'm left feeling conflicted. Which brings me back to this review. I don't want to bash these gloves because they are really cool, and I am glad I got a taste of what the future of social VR might be. I just don't think we're going to see that future without a lot of improvements on the software side, and even a bit on the hardware side. If I was being generous, I'd say that the HIG gloves build quality is small scale. If I wasn't being generous, I'd say, oh my gosh, almost every single part of these gloves is either 3D printed or generic. Not to mention, I had the incredibly small and delicate cable connecting the joystick module to the main unit come out twice during the production of this video, and sure, I'm a nerd, I can unscrew a teeny little module and put it back together, but a general consumer? No way. Which really cements these gloves as being for, well, VR hardware nerds. And that isn't even mentioning the price of these things. $250 for the gloves, dongle, and a mount point for a controller or a tracker. Technically speaking, that is a bit less than a brand new pair of index controllers, and you're getting more finger tracking than an index controller. but you're getting less positional accuracy unless you fork out extra for a Vive tracker and a base station, which is a sentence that I'm so tired of hearing and saying within VR hardware. Different discussion for a different day, though. As I said before, I got given a discount code on these, so I ended up paying quite a bit less than that, but for their full price, would I recommend them? Yes, to the hardest of hardcore VR nerds with a lot of disposable income. Someone who's already spent money on a better headset, on full body tracking, maybe even on face tracking, and you want to take your setup even further. Sure, you could argue that index controllers fill in that role, but I think the extra tracking on these and the novelty of the form factor makes these a worthwhile side grade if nothing else. You may consider them upgrade, maybe not, I don't know. One thing that's really in these gloves' favor is they're new and you can buy them right now. There's no wait list, there's no pre-order, there's no, is this actually going to happen? No, you can go on the website and buy them right now, use discount code PEMPIS.
I'd just like to say, I made a mistake. There is no discount code. You can go to the website and you can buy the gloves, but there is no discount. You'll get them at full price. But I'd like you to know that if I ever in future get to do this again, I will make it so that my discount code is PENPIS. Whatever. Okay, back to the video. Woo.
For everyone else, as always, it's gonna be stick with what you've already got and wait for something better. This is very much a first-gen product. Hell, maybe even a beta-gen product. And there are so many other gloves that are likely going to be coming out this year, probably into next year, that I think it'd be best to sit and wait and see which one shakes out being the budget king and the tracking king. It's possible Hig will be the budget king, or it's possible that they'll disappear in 6 months. I have no idea. Do you remember those gloves I mentioned at the start of the video? Remember how I said that I couldn't find drivers anywhere for them because they weren't hosted anywhere publicly? Now look at the fact that all of Hig's support and software is in a bloody Discord server. But only time will tell on that one. Right now, Alright, outro time. What do you think of these? Neat? Undercooked? Don't really care? Whatever it is, leave a comment, feed me engagement, you know the drill. There is so much stuff about these that I wanted to say, but I had to cut for time, like, oh my gosh, the entire use case of VTubing, for example. Other people will obviously cover those, and I recommend you watch other reviews too, but I'll also be in the comments trying to answer as many of your questions as possible for the coming weeks and months. And as much as I ended up dogging on them in the second half of the video, seriously big thanks to Hig for sending these gloves out to me. It was an insane reminder of just how quickly this channel is growing. Like, oh my gosh, the milestones keep coming. Hopefully I won't have to get a job this summer. But you didn't come here for loads of gushy, rambly whatevers. I'll see you soon. Take care. I'm going. Bye.